It's a great pleasure and honor to be part of this platform, and it's really overwhelming to see so many ladies around, because I'm used to being the only lady speaker, or let alone the only lady participant. I'll start by what's been already said. I'm a consultant at a government organization by day, and by night I'm a wife of a very supportive and loving husband who's sitting right at the back, and a mother of 4 children, and a grandmother of a granddaughter, all of which have been always inspiring to me. I will share with you today perspectives of my professional and personal achievements with the hopes of inspiring you and leaving a positive footprint. And I will start by quoting what our leader, His Majesty, has said back in the early 90s. Very wisely said, very simply said, but this is what has shaped me, how I feel and how I do with my work and with my life. To exclude women from playing meaningful roles in the life of their country amounted, in a sense, to excluding half the country's potential. You can see there's a great determination of change, and this is what has always inspired me, the way I do with my life. My talk will be spreading in 4 milestones, 4 turning over points that has helped shape me who I am today. 1980, 1997, 2013, 2016. I'm sure you all agree, we all go through stages and moments that shape us throughout our life. And to me, these were the 4 stages that has shaped me. 1990, before I get into the year 1980, I was in Iraq. And you may ask, why in Iraq? This is because my father used to have asthma, very sick, but then you're talking of early 50s and 60s where there's no medical resources, and this made things very difficult for him. So he had to relocate in a country where there is better facilities and also that shared a common language and common culture. So he moved to Iraq, met my mother, who has been always inspiration to me and my sisters. She was always pushing us to educate ourselves, to be self-dependent and sufficient. And of course, these ideals couldn't have been more important, especially if you know that my father passed away on an early age. And she was all alone, unemployed, charming, relatively young, looking after 7 children, wherein she has to educate, she has to bath, she has to look after, and it was during the first Gulf War at its worst. Unfortunately, we lost our mother a few years later, but her perseverance, her strength continued to echo through us. So back to 1980, I decided to study petroleum and minerals engineering. And you might be puzzled, why petroleum engineering, especially if you know that math was my weakest subject. And I used to tell my family, my sisters, I would never go near a career where it has the slightest relation to math. And look at me. I study engineering, which is another word for math, you all agree. But because this was my motto, I always challenged myself. So I studied petroleum engineering. Why? Because I thought this was very little what I can do to the country as a payback, because it has willingly sponsored my studies. And so this is the little thing I can do, and also because it was, and it still is, economically dependent on oil and the highest contributor to our GDP. Okay, so back to, I take my certificate, 1980, and I was the first lady petroleum engineer in Oman. Actually, I was among the very few university graduates back then in 1980. So I take my certificate, I take my papers to the concerned ministry, and I meet the person in charge of employees affairs looking for a job. And he takes my papers without even looking at them, placing them in the drawer, and he says, you can start right away. I wish things were that easy right now. Okay, so I go to this ministry, And then they send me for a petroleum company for training. And this petroleum company was predominantly males, predominantly expats. And I remember the looks they were giving me. What is she doing here? And the language of communication was English, and you can see them here. All men. And the men language of communication was English, and this was a great problem for me. But I didn't shy away. I insisted on learning the language, speaking the language, and making so many embarrassing mistakes, believe me. But I insisted because, after all, practice makes it perfect. And this went on until the year 1986, where I felt I was pursuing a career that didn't make me happy. Being the first lady engineer has come up with many challenges, professionally and personally. And I couldn't pursue something that didn't make me happy. So I resigned. And this was when I realized my first milestone, dealing with change. Life doesn't go the way you plan it. And I remember my mother used to tell us, if you face a curveball in your life, you must be always flexible, embrace change, and be optimistic. So I chose another path, a path of motherhood for the next 11 years, a path I very much admire and appreciate. I became I took this path for, I said, the next 11 years, but then my passion, my thrill for self-development never stopped. Don't get me wrong. Motherhood is a full-time job. It's quite rewarding, but I always missed the thrill of being part of the professional life. That's why I kept on doing studies, helping my husband with his work in part-time job. Until the year 1997. This is when my youngest, who's sitting right there, please you raise your hand. This is when she reached the age of 5. And this is when I felt it is the right time to go back to a full-time job. So I was lucky enough to be employed by the same government organization that I still work for. And I joined on their starting year. So we literally grew up together. But then being away from the professional life again, I had to restructure my thinking. I had to adapt to the technology shift back then, which is nothing like now, for my job survival. So I went to this organization, and believe me, when I was requested for the first time to address an international delegation, I was shivering like this. I didn't have any public speaking skills and lots of insecurities. But then I did it, and I still do it. I've engaged myself in so many workshops, training courses, seminars that will add on to my skill set. And, but then again, in 2001, I felt this is not enough. I need to challenge myself with something more. And capacity building is a requirement, especially when you're a woman. So I decided to do Masters in Business Administration. Very different from what I studied in university. In fields like, models like organizational learning, scenario planning, e-commerce, and all taught in British curriculum, which is, again, not familiar with me. And to add on to it, I did it during the worst personal conditions you can think of. My husband wasn't around, I had finance instability, and I had to look after my 4 children in addition to my degree. And I was lucky enough that my organization offered me a sabbatical leave for 2 years. And this is where I realized, oh, here you can see me publicly interviewed by one of the very famous journalists in Brussels. This is how training over and over made me, and this is how I'm here in front of you speaking. My second milestone was realizing my inner strength, working out of my comfort zone, and it's paid off because I got a distinction for my thesis, which was about introducing learning organization into our exporting industries. In 2013, this is where I reached my third milestone, when my second son has graduated from a leading university in the United States, and he is now working for a reputed company as an electrical engineer. This is where my third milestone is feeling of contentment and accomplishment, that I have guided them to the best that they deserve in life. And I felt how my mother must have felt about us. And this is him. And then takes me to 2016, last but not least, becoming a grandmother of a granddaughter, which is a fear many women has. But believe me, embracing my age, embracing my future, my achievement through her eyes was a great eye-opener and pleasing at once. That's her. So as a takeaway message for you, I must say that every one of us goes through challenges, day by day, challenge one after the other. But we must always, always learn to grow, to rise, to accommodate change, and be optimistic. And I would like to close and conclude by quoting what Mr. Carl Buchanan said in one of the TED Talks, because he expresses exactly what I want to achieve by this participation. He said, people might forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So I hope if my words didn't resonate with you, the emotion does. Thank you.